Welcome to the Digital Diaries. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Georgina Walsh, Director of Global Leadership Learning Programs at ServiceNow. Prior to that, she had a career in Salesforce and Dell, where she built her sales and leadership experience. A two-time Stevie Award winner, Georgina is widely recognized for her contributions to leadership and to making complex, meaningful change in global businesses. In today's conversation, we'll explore her career journey, insights on building meaningful change, and her vision for the future of leadership in tech. Georgina, warm welcome to the Digital Diaries.
Thank you so much, Peter. Delighted to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. We'll jump straight in, if I may. You've had a really impressive career to date. As I mentioned, you're in ServiceNow right now, and prior to that, Salesforce and Dell, all global powerhouses. What are the key moments or turning points for you in your career to date?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm going to go right back to when I joined Dell Technologies, because in fact, I'd had sales roles previous to joining Dell, and this is like going back like 22 years ago, Peter. I hate saying that out loud.
You and me both.
But it really was a pivotal moment, because that's when I joined the technology sector. And it was never in my plan, it was never in my line of sight to work in tech. In fact, I'd always wanted to be a school teacher way back when I was very, very young. And, so that plan changed, as many of our plans do. But it was really when I joined Dell that I got the bug for working in tech. Not even being a techie person, but the opportunities that I was presented with, the opportunity to really build my skill set, not just as a seller, but, halfway through my 11 years at Dell, I then transitioned into a coach role. I was lucky enough to embark on a coaching certification at that point. And the multitude of skills that I learned along that 11-year journey with Dell was really, for me, kind of the catalyst, I would say, to my career to date.
That's absolutely brilliant. And, for those of us that kind of were around at that time, I did a stint in Dell as well, and certainly a lot of people in South Dublin or east of Ireland had a time in Dell at some point. So it was definitely kind of a place where people went to learn and build on their careers, and some of our colleagues are still there, which is fantastic for them and for Dell. With that, one of the things I noticed a lot where we were overlapped the most was in Salesforce, and you were leading enablement there. One of the things that was extremely obvious to me was the relationships you had with your sales leading stakeholders. There was a very core and strong relationship. How do you go about kind of cultivating and maintaining that?
Yeah, wow, what a great question. So I learned very early on, particularly being an enablement professional, we can have all of the most innovative, wonderful ideas, in the world. But without stakeholder relationships and backing, they're just not going to go anywhere. And I realized that very, very quickly, that the key to success was having that buy-in right at the top. And I learned a few lessons along the way. I'm not going to lie. And when we're dealing with very senior people, we're talking about senior vice president level.
Yeah.
In my role currently, I'm dealing at working with the president level, and they're all very, very different. And they're all very, very busy, and, have a multitude of metaphorical balls in the air, let's say.
Yeah.
And for me, the key to building those relationships was, one, absolutely fully understanding what mattered to them, what problems they were facing, and how could I support them? How could I support solving those problems? And so having a very well-informed point of view on challenges in the business, what they were trying to solve for, and how the programs I was bringing would solve for those challenges. So that's the first part. But the second part, which is where I kind of learned some lessons along the way, was very much around their communication style.
Okay.
The type of personality that they had. And like I said, I made mistakes along the way here, in terms of if you're familiar with insights, if anyone on the call is familiar with insights, I'm a high yellow, high green.
Similar,
so
yeah.
So I remember going into a relationship with an SVP, and I was very much wanting to get to know this stakeholder about their family and their kids and how their day had been and all of this stuff. And that's how I began the relationship, whereby I realized that actually this stakeholder just wanted me to come in with the absolute facts, very brief, sort of get in and get out approach. And that relationship was very difficult, in fact, and I'm going to say it actually never recovered. And so I really learned a lot from being very self-aware of myself and my own style and others' styles, and how I might need to adapt my style according to the stakeholder. So it's not easy. I'm not going to say there's a magic pill or silver bullet for it. But for me, I think that self-awareness coupled with business acumen has given me has allowed me to develop those relationships.
It's really, fascinating, because the first part of what you're saying is it sounds like you're selling internally in terms of what problems that we're trying to solve for. So you're trying to sell to people who are busy and who work on your business, and that's tricky in itself. And I mean, I think I could guess who you're talking about, and I know very much that when you deal with a red-blue person like that, they're so black and white in terms of how they can see things and are so focused on the goal at hand. It's not that they're rude or anything like that. It's just that we're here to work, 9 to 5. This is the job. This is all I care about during this time. And it's something I'm sometimes envious of, because it's like as though they can switch off their personal lives from 9 to 5, It's kind of bizarre. It's tricky, though, recovering the relationship one. And I suppose you'll never know. As you say, you took the learning from it, and that's the best thing. And I don't think it's held you back in terms of where you are today. But one thing that, and I appreciate, in the companies I've worked with, sometimes I've been like, oh God, not another enablement program, here we go, kind of thing, taking me away from my day job. How do you actually come up with a successful program that the ICs and the team across the team are really going to be engaged in and actually solve that problem?
Yeah. Again, I'm really lucky, I guess. Like I said, I don't like saying out loud 22 years in the sector and experience, but it also, of course, adds to learnings, failures along the way, but also, really significant learning along the way. And I suppose when I think of where I'm at now within ServiceNow, one of our flag leadership programs I've just rolled out. Well, we just closed it off last year. So we rolled it out to 850 leaders within the company. Mm-hmm. And this was a program that began as a very small pilot a couple of years ago in EMEA and really gained momentum and significant business results as well. And so is now a global program which every leader up to the president level attends.
Wonderful.
But when I reflect on, this program didn't exist a couple of years ago at ServiceNow. Mm-hmm. And so when I reflect on what I wanted to do, and I saw an opportunity for us to really support our leadership team at ServiceNow. And so I knew from experience that in order to get this off the ground and in order to get the traction that I now have, going up to our chief commercial officer level, I needed to align to the business. That's just bottom line. And so a couple of things I did. I mean, the first thing I did was, we're lucky enough that in our go-to-market organization, we have a very well-defined plan, go-to-market plan. And that comes from our chief commercial officer. And so I took that plan and that blueprint and dissected. So we had the high-level plan, but I really drilled into, well, what would it take to deliver on these goals at the first line level? Because a lot of times in organizations, we have wonderful high-level plans, but what does it actually mean at the first line? For me as a seller or for me as a first-line leader, it can be confusing, it can be too high level. And so I spent a lot of time really drilling into, well, what are the key metrics? What are the key activities and behaviors that we expect to see from our sellers? In order for us to move the needle on this plan. I'm going to say it took me, so that was one part of it, but the second part of it was a roadshow. Initially, when I built it across EMEA, and when I say roadshow, that was identifying every single possible stakeholder that may have a view, that may want to provide feedback, that could potentially support the program,
Yeah.
and getting all of their input, all of their buy-in. That took me about 6 months before I could even begin thinking about execution.
Sure.
But it was such a critical part, because when the program then moved from being an EMEA program to a global program, I had this whole set of champions in EMEA at very senior levels who were already familiar with the program, endorsing the program, speaking to their global colleagues. And so it became very easy then to transition from simply an EMEA program to what is now a global program.
That is just a wonderful story. And, what I take from that, always I look for a kind of what I would call the basics or the simple things. You listen to what your customers wanted, first and foremost, and you got their insight. And I think that first 6 months, which probably felt a bit tiring, was probably the most important 6 months in understanding going, is this going to work?
Yeah.
Because whatever about local stakeholders, and I mean EMEA local, when you go to APAC or EMEA, they're like, oh, I don't really care about what someone in Dublin wants.
Yeah.
So you really have to make sure that it's of value at first sight. And that was brilliant to get that done. And now a global program.
Yeah. It's now a global program, yeah. But, we still continue to iterate the program, and we still continue, of course, to get that feedback and buy-in on a continuous basis. But the process is so simple now.
Yeah.
The program, it's called Amplify Manager Program. The brand itself is now speaking for itself. So I really put it down to that initial 6 months of hard work, socialization, and distilling a lot of feedback. Because let's face it, very senior stakeholders all have opinions and want to provide feedback. And that can be tricky in itself to address that feedback and integrate it into the program.
Yeah, indeed. And that, look, it's lovely to hear that it has a brand and its own one. I've seen that in other organizations as well, and it's fantastic. With that, then, it probably brings nicely into the next question. What's the enablement role, in your view, of developing talent from IC into first line management and management up the director, VP, etc.? How does your role play into that?
Yeah, great question. And it's a wonderful question, actually, because I do firmly believe enablement have a role to play in succession planning, in the development of, and the retention, of course, of talent in our organizations. And in fact, we've built a program at ServiceNow to address exactly that. So we take a subset of ICs who are high potential, who have been recognized as future talent and potentially future leadership. And we essentially put them through what is a lighter version of our leadership programs. So we expose them to coaching.
Cool.
Which a lot of them may not be familiar with, or may not even be receiving, let's be honest. So we expose them to things like, how do you build trust within a team, coaching, mentoring. But a big part and a very critical part for us is really focusing on that shift, that mindset shift from player, high performing seller, to leader, to coach. Our job really there is to recognize it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
I can be a top performing seller, and so I think the next natural move for me is to move into leading teams. When in fact there's a very significant shift in mindset.
Yeah.
And so we expose them to things like that, and we give them opportunities to practice coaching, to thinking about that mindset shift that they need to make, because we don't want people moving into roles and not being successful.
Yeah.
Or moving into leadership roles and remaining in that IC mentality and not bringing their teams along with them. So we really do focus a lot on that aspect. Of course, we focus on the operational parts, managing pipeline and forecasting from a leader perspective. But for us, the more critical part is the softer skills, the mindset shift needed. And is this really what you want? And are we setting you up for success when you do move into that role?
That is a really interesting point, because a former manager of mine, decent manager, but he was an incredible AE. And I wholeheartedly believe that person would be better off as a very senior enterprise AE, and that the businesses that he works in would benefit more from him in that capacity. Because not that he would take over deals, but he would see gaps quicker than anybody else. He'd know how to address them. Like, he was just incredible. And he was clearly, I asked people about companies he worked in before, he was a very self-reliant individual. So when you're that mindset going into a leadership role, it's not necessarily the best thing for developing the team, but it's incredible for getting deals moving forward. And I think, it's a really, really fascinating point, because leadership is about looking after people and bringing out the best in them and making them realize their potential and living up to that potential. Often people sell themselves short in the first place. So it's a very, very big mindset shift from one to the other. Cool. That's a really, really interesting story. And I'm going to stick on kind of enablement in itself, specifically onboarding, if I may. I've had the privilege of onboarding in person, remote, and hybrid. And my personal preference is in person. I think it's better for the breakout sessions, etc. How do you manage it in hybrid and remote settings where, if you're trying to do those things that, something can be lost on a camera? How does that work, and how do you make sure you get good engagement from the team when they're new in the business like that?
Yeah, well, excuse me. So I'm going to refer back to the AMP program, in fact, that I just mentioned. It is a leadership program. But when I initially built it, we had managers who were onboarding, who were new to the company, newly hired or newly promoted. And when I first built the program back in FY22, the first iteration, I was lucky enough to run in person. Fantastic. Got the budget. Second iteration, we were still kind of in COVID times and we had to pivot to virtual.
Okay.
And so I had done both. And the biggest piece I realized from doing it in person, I ran it in Amsterdam. We had those wonderful in-person connections. We also had lovely dinners. We had a lovely canal boat trip.
Yeah.
All of the things that really add to learner experience, in my view. So I was really mindful of, how can I make this cohort, how can I make this memorable for this cohort in this virtual setting? And there's a number of things I think that we all do in enablement, being ensuring that we aren't on camera for too long, that the content is very concise, it's maybe 30-minute bursts, plenty of breaks. And I was very confident in the content, but I was more mindful of the learner experience. And so one of the things I did was introduce music as a mechanism to engage my audience, to lighten the mood when we were shifting from topic to topic. So each session had a 10 to 12 second walk-in song, let's say, which was directly aligned to the topic.
Yeah.
So and I would ask my audience, why did I choose that song and who's the band, and sort of a bit of a lightheartedness. We closed out the program. It was still a 3-day virtual program. And I thought, we've got to get some more engagement and fun going on here. And so we closed out the program with a virtual Zoom sing-along to Bohemian Rhapsody, which we recorded. But, these are... it really was. But, if you think of my audience, this is a group of leaders, very experienced, a lot of experience, and further on along in their careers. But they jumped at the opportunity. It was optional. They got engaged. We had Queen virtual backgrounds. Some of them wore t-shirts, recorded the whole thing. And that for me was really just enhancing the learner experience, let's say, and acknowledging that we're all on Zoom. This is virtual. We're in our home offices. Yeah. It's tough being on screen. But we're still people and we still want those human connections. And that for me is always the essence of any enablement programs that I run. There's got to be learner experience. And it depends on how you define learner experience. But for me, it's very personable, engaging with people on sometimes a silly level, which is a sing-along to Bohemian Rhapsody.
I'm not sure I'd call that silly at all. It sounds like a bloody good day. I do remember when you were running an event in Salesforce one time, the song you were using was Rapper's Delight, and the person beside me didn't know what it was, and I just cringed for them. I'm like, you've got some problems there.
Yeah, well, there you go. You can see a trend, Peter.
Yeah.
I was always a fan of bringing music into enablement programs.
But it's such a wonderful way to do it, because the way the memory works in terms of association, if it's a song that we know, we hear Bohemian Rhapsody, we think of that day.
Yeah.
And it triggered there for me. I hadn't scripted that I would bring this up, but that's what happened, So it's a fantastic association to kind of build a positive connection in a person's mind. So hopefully the thing sinks in.
Hopefully that's not all they remember. But yeah.
I mentioned in your intro, and congratulations again on being a 2-time Stevie Award winner. Can you tell us a little bit about the Stevie Awards that you won and what the initiatives were that got the recognition that you did get?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So for anyone who isn't aware of the Stevie Awards are, in the enablement world, considered the Oscars of enablement, let's say. So yeah, so very, very proud to have 2 awards. And so the first award kind of came about in an interesting way. So I built a program. In fact, I built it back at Salesforce, but of course we maintain our programs as enablement professionals.
Of course.
And it was a really simple program. It's coaching circles, and coaching circles are group coaching for peer leaders. So my audience were typically first-line leaders. And it was a series of group coaching sessions run across the year, various topics, either typically aligned to moments in time in the business, in the fiscal year, and what was top of mind for them. So, for example, our coaching circles this quarter, we're in Q1, we look at planning, but we also look at end-of-year reviews, promotion cycles, etc. And so, being a qualified coach myself, I began my coaching journey about 16 years ago, still very much an active coach. And so I was really driving that coaching culture. Long intro. One of the things that I hope I kind of pride myself on as an enablement professional is sharing my programs with others who want to leverage them. And so I had a colleague who said, hey, I'd love to run coaching circles for my part of the business. Here you go, no problem. Here's all the content, templates, etc. And so she ran it, and then I got a call from her. I was actually on holidays in Mexico, and she was chasing me down. And she said, I hope you don't mind, I've submitted the program for a Stevie Award. And so, I thought, well, of course I don't mind. This is fantastic. Thank you for thinking about it and for doing all the legwork and submitting the application and everything. So she went ahead and did that. So she brought the Stevie Awards really to me. I hadn't considered it previously. And thankfully we won the award for coaching circles. And so I got the Stevie Award, the Stevie Awards bug, let's say, having won it for coaching circles, because I realized at times as enablement professionals, we can get so caught up in what we're doing. We can become a bit insular. The Stevie Awards were just a wonderful way to showcase our work and to have that recognition from completely independent judges, global judges across a multitude of industries. So last year, with the AMP program that I've mentioned a couple of times now, this is a great program. Why not go ahead and submit it for a Stevie Award, which I did. And again, we won, which is really fantastic. And I've just gone ahead and submitted again for the Stevies for 2025 for this year. So watch this space. Let's hope we make it again. But the value for me, recognition is great, of course, but the value is kind of 2-part. I mean, one, of course, is the recognition from independent judges who are very professional, very experienced, and are recognizing your work outside of your organization. But the second part is when you submit a Stevie Award, you get really detailed feedback from the judges as well after each time, which is invaluable. And I've taken that feedback and actually incorporated it into the program itself for this year. So really worthwhile activity and initiative for anyone who hasn't done it and you think you've a great program. I would go ahead and apply.
And I think that there's a lovely lesson in that, because, your friend and colleague kind of nudged you the first time and said, come on, this is good enough to be recognized. It deserves recognition. And then when you see it, you kind of go, you know what, I'm not being arrogant here. This is good stuff. I should be proud of this work. And that's a really nice lesson to take from it. And it's great to even get it there, as you say, you get the feedback from senior coaches in a very granular level. That really allows you to kind of polish up your future programs, which is fantastic. A common theme I like to ask on this is, I've had a few people on, and I'm one of them, where career started out one way and it went another and it moved. Obviously, you've moved from sales to enablement. Tell us what brought about that transition and how you'd encourage someone to go about doing it themselves.
Wonderful question. And so I mentioned earlier that when I was a kid, I was really annoying with my sister, my friends, my cousins. I would always play at school and I wanted to be the teacher. And so very early on, that was the goal. And then, of course, I did a marketing degree, marketing in French. So nothing to do with teaching. But it had always been my passion. And back in my Dell days, I was a seller for about 6 years, absolutely loved it. But it got to a point where I realized, as new people were coming onto the team, I was coaching them, I was mentoring them, I was onboarding them, and I realized that was where my passion was.
Yeah.
And I was enjoying that part of the role more than selling. And so I was lucky enough then at Dell, they had a wonderful coaching program and coaching opportunities. And so I moved into a coaching role, and I spent 3 years in a coaching role there. So that has always been my passion, developing people, which led me, of course, across the years then after I left Dell to move into a wonderful opportunity at Salesforce, came up to move into enablements. Moved into a coaching role, lucky enough at Salesforce, a wonderful opportunity came up in enablement. These opportunities were really playing to not only my strengths, but my passions. And a passion that I'd held from a very young age, as I've mentioned, as a child. And I also, I remember, again, during my time at Dell, a great initiative and an opportunity I had was to visit secondary schools, and particularly girls in secondary schools. And I would open the session with hand in the air, who wants to get into teaching, who would like to be a teacher. And typically I saw about 80% of the room put their hand in the air.
Yeah.
And that was my opportunity to kind of open and ask the question, well, have you considered a career in technology, in the tech industry? Because in fact, the tech industry holds a multitude of opportunities. And particularly for me, I've been so lucky to make that shift. And the coaching role was really the catalyst to give me experience, not only from a coaching skills perspective, but really working and developing others. And it's really just led me to where I am now, and having spent 10 years specifically in enablement.
Yeah,
right now.
That's a lovely story, and it's a great piece of advice about kind of finding your passion, because it doesn't sound entirely like you went looking for it in one way. Is that you just kind of had a moment of reflection and went, you know what, I really like this. And even in my own role as an AE, when I'm working with an SDR, I remember one guy in particular, he was petrified about making a cold call. He didn't know how to structure it. And we just spent like half an hour in a room, and I was like, look, there's not actually that much to this. I said, here's the framework that we start from, and just whiteboarded it. And, we went from not knowing how to start to being able to make a cold call and start going at it. And, that was a pathway that helped the guy start off his career. So I think that there's a lovely lesson in that. Georgina, I'm going to leave on the technical questions, but I do always like to say the Digital Diaries goes beyond, professional world. A little bit about yourself. What do you like to do on the weekends? See your little dog there in the background.
Well, if I think of the weekends right now, the weather's absolutely freezing here. So it's typically kind of holed up in the house.
Yeah.
But some of particular passion for me, typically, first of all, I love to travel with my husband, but I'm also lucky enough to travel all around the world with my job as well. But one of the things I particularly love doing when I'm traveling is just seeking out antique stores. I love to kind of just have really unusual pieces around the house, which I'm lucky enough that I have. So I just kind of love to pick up unusual pieces that have a bit of a story behind them. And I also love the vintage stores. So a lot of my wardrobe is full of vintage clothing that I will never wear, but I still, that's one of the things I love to do, particularly in different countries.
Yeah.
And we're just huge music fans in this house. In fact. So maybe bringing my own personal passions into my professional life as well. We go to a lot of gigs, a lot of festivals when the weather gets better. So typically, yeah, that's what we like to do.
That is pretty amazing. I'll give you a quick music trivia question. Name the only three artists in history to sell 100 million albums, both as a solo artist and as a principal member as a group. I'll give you the answers. I know I put you on the spot. It is
Give me the answer.
Paul McCartney, Michael Jackson, and Phil Collins.
Oh,
Phil Collins is the one that
wow.
usually catches people because when you think about it, I know you weren't ready for that. With Paul McCartney, you go, yeah, fair enough. Had to be one of the Beatles. Michael Jackson, people get quick enough. But Phil Collins is the one that often catches people out. But it's all different with
Very
streaming,
good.
though, today.
Oh,
Georgina, we'll wrap things up. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your career insights, your personal passions. As we know, if we want to get you on the sweet side, it's tickets to any festival sound like the way to go. Congratulations on all your success, the Stevie Awards, the career to date. It's been absolutely fascinating to learn about it. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with ourselves today.
thank you so much, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful.
Like work-life balance, I'm not a poster child for it. I struggle with it a lot, which for me often comes from I love my work. I love working in pre-sales. I absolutely love it. And delivering something that's less than 110% doesn't make me feel good because I kind of hold myself to a certain standard. Now, that comes with the thing of, yeah, there's going to be certain weekends that I just work. There's going to be crazy hours that I work because that's the standard that I hold myself to. And I was just like, I wish I was the type of person who could just kind of close it and go over and saying, hey, I can come back to it. Most of the time, I'm not. But part of it is also, that's the expectation that I hold myself to.